Okay, so our fall preview. Essentially, what we're trying to tell you is a little bit about what we're going to be talking about later in the fall, and a little bit about what we're going to be surveying for the course of this year, just related to, you know, what we think is the trend in the market, just from what we saw in the spring. The spring market was very interesting to us. We've already had one webinar on that, but let me give you some data about what we've been sharing out. So first of all, in each meeting that we've been in, we talk about the trend lines, like what's happening in the market overall and where that is going to go. So one of those parts is, of course, student attrition, and that's really high. I've talked to a couple of districts just in the last couple of weeks. They're looking at losing 500 to 2,000 some students. They know they're going to be losing. That's a really big deal. And then there's the absenteeism that's really high. Parts of New Mexico have absenteeism as high as 70%. Other big districts like Los Angeles have seen really high, like 15% absenteeism. And other markets, of course, are seeing it as well. This is a culture shift. There's been a very significant shift in the respect for the formalization, for the formal education sort of structure we have in the United States, and it's affecting a lot of different things. Then there's a teacher shortage. We're expecting another 6% loss going into the new school year. So we'll be looking at 1 in 4 to 1 in 5, maybe 1 in 6 classrooms empty everywhere, not being able to get the teachers you need. There is a coincident rise in the number of tutoring companies that are offering tutors and substitutes to flank your teachers. So that's a bit of a blessing. But we're still seeing this really phenomenal shortage that doesn't look like it's going to end at least until 2030. And then you have EdTech spend, which is also down nationwide. It doesn't necessarily mean that the budgets are not there right now. It means that schools and districts are concerned about what's going to happen with their new school year with their loss of students, and they're paid by numbers of students mostly. So there's also these culture shifts. The alpha generation is very different. They're the ones, there's the kids in schools right now. And then you have the ideological bifurcation, the political one, but, really huge line of demarcation. The last election changed everything. There's the post-pandemic shifts people are still talking about. We do have practically every school in America is now 1-to-1, which is a huge difference. Still getting used to it. A lot of teachers not necessarily used to it yet. And then you've got what's happening with the economy, what's happening with immigration, what's happening with even more technology advancement, particularly around AI. The collapse of the commercial real estate sector is pushing the narrative, basically, that people don't want to be in cities anymore. They're moving out. You're going to see this out-migration trend continue, at least for the next 10 years that we can see. And of course, there's been a demographic shift. So when we talk about where the market is going, and this is not something anyone's really seen yet, we've only been sharing this privately with some school districts, but we don't believe that this whole group factory model where all the learning is distributed by teachers, so it's sort of top-down curriculum map, and then at the teacher's classroom door, the authority ends, and then all lessons are built by individual teachers. That's going to shift. It has to shift because of the teacher shortage, but it will shift to distribution with teachers. The normal thinking in this market right now is that you can't learn without a teacher. Well, that's what's proven not true, because 50% of the kids learned quite well just online, even during the pandemic, but the other 50% learned almost nothing at all. So there's the truth that you need humans, but how you use the humans for their teaching capabilities is really a bone of contention with a lot of teachers. If you check Reddit right now and ask a few questions about how teachers feel about the classroom right now, they're complaining about the mixed ability, the onerous expectations on them, the constant changes in direction from leadership. And it's a very frustrating time for teachers, and it's causing more of them to quit because the structure for them has become untenable. So changing structure is going to be the mode of thinking. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about that. But that learning distribution with teachers is a very important distinction to make to what the future holds. So we've talked a lot about personalization with time AI. This is a different kind of AI than most people are used to thinking about. It basically makes it so that you can take the whole group and structure it to do one cohort at a time, multiple class meetings where there would have otherwise been one. And each one is shorter and smaller. It's using fractional time. So you can get rid of the whole group manufacturing factory pattern and sort of move to pace-based teacher intersected. Doesn't necessarily have to mean competency. It just means a study sequence intersected with the live teaching. And then, of course, that creates a whole different future potential for flexibility that's beyond the school itself and up to the district, maybe up to the state, maybe up to multiple states, where maybe you're using teachers from a long ways away and sharing a teacher you have to a far distant school unit. Well, like that cohort is meeting with your cohort. So there's a lot of flexibility coming into the market from technology. The other thing we talk a lot about is the homeschooling growth. We've never seen anything like this. It's still at a growth rate of 51 to 65% year over year since 2020. Actually, during 2020 was over 85%. School vouchers now in 19 states going to be about 360 billion in terms of what potential money could leave the normal routes of money and go directly as voucher money. That's nearing 45% of the national market's total amount of money for public education. So what we also talk a lot about is that 41% of administrators in traditional schools have a mindset to affect some transformation. They know they want to do something. They're just not sure what they want to do yet. So they're trying a lot of different things. They haven't really thought about moving away from whole group. Maybe they've thought, well, that's going to be online. Isn't that online where you just put the kids on? They think in a bifurcated way. It's either all on campus and whole group with teachers behind closed doors classrooms, moving in a factory pattern, or it's online. Also, the teachers are saying they really can't personalize learning. If you have kids that are in second grade language and you're trying to teach ninth grade language, it's almost impossible to catch them up. People try, and eventually they become demoralized by it. And that's what's kind of killing teaching. So the attempt to try to personalize the learning pathway while you're already doing one pathway with a whole group, very, very hard on teachers. And also only 28% of Americans have confidence in public schools anymore. So this is really why a shift in structure is going to become much more evident. Okay. So then the number one hurdle that we also talk about at all these events, this is the kind of data we're showing the educators when they come to these events, is that teachers and administrators have their traditional beliefs. They think this is the way it is, and this is what it looks like. They're not really looking at different structure. They're maybe only looking at models that might be more student-centric, might be more personalized. And then, of course, like I said, teachers are overwhelmed. So by 2030, if you take all these trend lines, like all the threads of them, and look at where they're going and how they might intersect with other ones, what you end up with is realizing that we're only going to be at about 51% in public education by the end of this decade. It's all going to be moving into any kind of alternative. Now, some of those alternatives might come up in public education. There's already charters. Those might grow. There might be new things coming out of public education. And the homeschooling numbers and private school numbers are a little squishy because some of that might be a online school attached at the state level that looks like homeschooling, but it's really, they're associated to like a school or a course program from a state. Now, this last year we had over 5,000 school closures. We'll get a little higher than that number probably this year. The 24-25 school year. So there's a lot of districts looking at big closures, but I want you to notice this one number, which is that displaced almost 1 million students. Now, a lot of times when school districts, well, almost all the time when they close a school, they're expecting consolidation. The same kids that were at these other schools are now going to all come here, but they lose a huge number of them when they do that. So the displacement factor is also a disruption that's affecting attrition and everything else. All right, so what do we do when we're at these events? Just to give you a heads up so you can know what to expect for the fall. We talk about, for the first hour or so, we hand out worksheets basically for multiple tables. Each table has a different thing to work on. And this year we're having them work on what are the 9 revised human intelligences that align with what the human mind is actually doing. What is the fundamental human mind algorithm? Once they understand what AI is really doing, it's important to understand how the human mind functions. So there's the whole thing that when they talk about there. And then they talk about what are the old methods versus the new methods in various different buckets. And a few other conversations, like we talk a lot about generation alpha and its distinct characteristics and what does that mean for teaching and learning. Then we also present all of our sponsor data, like who they are, what are their products, blah, blah, blah. We survey people and they get to respond. Here's what we're interested in, not interested in. And we do a lot of socialization at the events, getting to know people. We talk about the new book that just came out that I wrote along with my research team and AI. That is really about the human singularity. It's about the thesis of it was, how do we balance AI? How do we do that? How do we make it so that whatever we're doing as humans, we raise our intelligence to really balance AI? So we had to look really deep into a lot of different things. It's a very interesting topic. And one of the things we talk about is that we could, by increasing human intelligence in all 9 areas, actually balance AI if we were cognizant that we needed to teach the areas that we're not currently teaching much of. We teach maybe Latin, math, and language, a little bit naturalistic for science, but the other areas are largely missing in our curriculums. What would happen if we did that? And then we talk about this whole pathway for how AI gets built, so you can understand in layman's terms what each thing is and how it works. And then, of course, those 9 areas of human intelligence and what they mean and how they interrelate. So our takeaways from spring 2025 were these, and apologize, I'm looking at this other screen while I'm talking to you. The shift to the thinking is more about, like, what about workforce preparedness? How are we going to prepare people in the workforce? Like, now that AI is on the scene, what does that mean for their jobs? The conversations here, by the way, are very deep. Like, how do we teach discipline? How do we teach time management? None of these things have been on our radar. And what undercuts literacy, those kinds of things. And also, they're also looking at, like, holistic change, like I talked about already. Like, this isn't working. We're so frustrated. What do we do? What do we got to be to appeal to people? Of course, there's a million ideas I could put in that bucket. People are always screaming for STEM and let's do more with AI and let's do this, but they don't necessarily think in structure, most because people are in their little cubicle of work-related focus, and they're not thinking of the whole enterprise against the friction of what's happening in the outside world. And that's what we like to talk about when we come out on an event. We're like, hey, look what's going on out there. This is what's happening with retail. This is what is happening with the commercial real estate market. Tells you a lot. This is what's going on with the economy, the expectations. What do consumers want? Do they even know what they want? What if they want something that we've never presented them before? We've never even thought about presenting to them. And then they think, oh, that's the thing that I've always wanted. I didn't know I wanted. Those are the conversations. So there's a lot of duplicate or similar app deletion going on the market, again, because they think they're not going to have enough money. But what we're talking to them when we get on the road is, what if you started thinking of yourself as a tech enterprise first institution? So you're a technology purveyor of knowledge direct to the individual consuming student, and then you array your humans around that. What would that infrastructure workflow look like? What are all the parts and pieces, and how do you put that all together in a giant pyramid? So we are telling people that's definitely where that's going. It's also going there because AI types are going to be converging fairly soon. And then there's still a big curiosity. This is our takeaway about tech. People really want it. They want more tools. They want better tools. The shopping behavior is really majestic. They're still buying, but a lot of the buying is still from existing tech vendors. So it's a relationship creation problem for new companies, particularly if they're highly innovative, because they can't get in, which is one of the reasons we do these field events, because a lot of times executives can't get away from their district and go to some conference in some far distant state and stay for 3 or 4 days. And, getting them locally means they're more comfortable. They're meeting other local people. They're discussing their local problems with each other. It's just a more comfortable thing to go to a meeting than a big conference. Okay, so another thing that happened this spring was we had one person we talked to was Dr. Doug Hendricks from Atlanta, Georgia, really innovative mind. This gentleman has identified structure and the form of the organization as the problem, the 250-year-old factory model, which I've been talking about for many years. He and I obviously hit it off like this, because he was like on my vibe. I just couldn't believe it. I just wanted to roll around on the floor. I'm just so happy, right? But he talked a lot about that. And one of his things that he said is that just as society has moved past Blockbuster to embrace Netflix and other streaming services, education must move past its industrial age foundation. So the fact that this type of discourse is now coming out, and he even wrote a book about it, and I've heard similar comments from a lot of other superintendents, not quite as bold as Dr. Hendricks, it means that we're into some sort of new resonance level nationally, and I think it's very significant. All right, so just to give you an idea of the fall, the first city we're going to be in is Yorktown Heights, New York. We don't go into the city anymore, for a number of different reasons, but we do go out to Yorktown Heights and we invite people up from New York City. It's actually easier for them to leave than to go have people come into the city or even across the city to an event. It's just easier. So the BOCES is hosting us again this year. They're marvelously wonderful people. And the top 5 districts in that area, none of them are really large. The districts in the East Coast are like smaller in terms of geographic area than the one, by the time you get to, the West Coast, they're massive. And Florida, like, what is there, only 7 or something in Florida? So those districts are like smaller numbers of kids, but certainly innovative and interested in what they can do to change. And they're all using ed tech already. They're doing something with it, not necessarily knowing their full stack very well, or leading the tech stack in a workflow oriented manner, but definitely in the vein of like, what do we do? How do we do this? So a couple of the speakers that'll be there is Lisa Weber, the Assistant Superintendent for Instruction from Suffern Central School District, and then Frank Guglieri from the PNW BOCES on Regional Safety Services. This is kind of a big topic right now, like anything having to do with security and safety, people are all over it in every direction, physical, cyber, the whole thing. And then there'll probably be quite a few other speakers. We've also invited down a good friend of ours from Meriden, Connecticut, superintendent up there. He's got a new book coming out and want him to maybe be on the panel with his team. He's got a wonderful team. And if we don't have him there, maybe we'll invite him out to Boston next spring. All right, so just to give you an idea, we did one of the districts of one of the cities, a full inventory of what they have in play already. They have 214 apps. The average for the large district, this smaller district, is 2,500, okay, at least. I mean, there's places that have many, many more thousands of apps in play, but some of these really tiny little apps, like some special needs or like, something that transposes, spoke into like typed so that the hearing impaired can manage that. And just tons, like just tons of apps. And I look at these stacks of things, software little pieces running around, and sometimes they're big systems and, the office suites and all that other stuff. And online sites like YouTube and those kinds of guys. And I think to myself, how do you even think with this as an IT director? How do you even hope to manage this? Well, they try really hard. Ohio's really good at vetting everything and saying this is approved or that is approved, but how many people are using? And I don't think they're really into that. And they certainly haven't organized it into a stack with flow against the courses. They don't have written courses. Almost no one does unless they're an online school or an online course provider. So it's sort of random teachers accessing things, based on like the individual teacherness. So this structure write the curriculum map and then stop at the classroom door and then everything else goes on now at the teaching and learning level is really to empower the teacher. But what's actually happening per our national research is it's overwhelming teachers. They want the world of give me my pathway, give me my structured course, and then I can, sort of tweak it and maybe add and delete and recommend and take one student off this little side trail over here and then they can go back on. That's the way that the thinking is right now, because this is really messy. I don't know any other industry that even comes close to this level of massive pieces of software in play. So then we'll be in Fauquier, I cannot say that name, Virginia, and those are the big 5 districts in that area. We'll invite all 50 in the 100-mile radius. And then these are the big 5 in Columbus. We'll invite all 60 in the area. Some of these are really large districts. And normally when the large districts, we get whole teams that come, tech side, curriculum side, assistant super over here, sometimes the security people, sometimes the people that are over communications, for the district. They want to know what's going on in the news. And they normally accompany their superintendent if the superintendent comes. Also, Oklahoma City, excited to go back up there. Smaller districts, but certainly innovative up there. They're really interested in tech. And then all around Dallas, we'll probably have Dallas ISD people in the Dallas event, but we're going to go north. We've been down by Garland 2 years in a row, but we're going to go north Dallas this time and maybe get some Fort Worth people over there up to Plano and all that kind of stuff. And then Little Rock, of course, I live in Little Rock, so I'm really interested in this. And I know we're going to have state level people attend. Arkansas just passed choice legislation, so there's a lot of interest in this state, a lot of what can we do to innovate at every level, and then out to San Diego. So that's going to be fun. We're going to do San Diego. We already have a facility booked out there, and of course, San Diego Unified usually supports us really well. So does Poway. We should have a good number of other districts involved. Traffic though is there's always a problem, San Diego. And then Los Angeles, where traffic is always the worst in the nation. But we're hoping to be in LA Unified or the regional service center that they have out there. And if not there, we may end up going to Pasadena or somewhere around Hollywood to invite districts out there. We normally in Los Angeles get a concentration from a few districts and then onesie twosies from somewhere out in the middle of nowhere. So we have to provide local hotels for them to stay overnight. Otherwise, they don't make it to the event because the traffic's so bad. And then Fresno, which is, surprisingly large districts. It's, you would think Fresno is right in the middle of the state. No one goes to Fresno. Where's Fresno? But my husband grew up there, and really brilliant districts out there, especially Clovis Unified and the CTO of Fresno Unified. He's retired now. He used to be a really good friend of his, but they've got some real innovation going as well. And then the last city we'll be in is New Orleans. We are going to make New Orleans national in scope. We're going to do some really interesting things there and invite some people out from other states to come down to New Orleans for our last event of the year to talk about a first look at the surveys that we're going to do this summer and what they're going to be doing as they go into their next semester of 2025. So here's a couple other top takeaways for you. Our fall assumptions going into all these meetings is that there's going to be even more concern about AI. That's because there's been a new presidential directive to not legislate or do any policy against generative AI for this next coming 10 years. This is a little scary for people in education because we don't know what it's really doing with kid data, and we want to have some sort of protectionary stance because we're naturally parenting all those kids, as well as with their parents. We have the thought pattern of protectionism. So we're concerned about that, but we're also concerned about AI convergence. Generative AI is only one of the types of AI. Law enforcement has been experiencing the three-dimensional AI. It's a totally different world, and self-driving cars have computer vision. When that comes into the market, that's a game changer too for robotics and everything else. We also have, assuming that they'll all be lamenting the fact that they've lost more students, assuming that those conversations could be had right out of the gate. They're significantly they'll be significantly alarmed by a lack of teachers. We know that that's going to happen. And we know that there's going to be an interest in what can we do, right? Beyond tech, the ed tech itself, what could we do? What do we need to be? And that conversation is hitting a ceiling now. On the first, I'll talk a little bit more about what superintendents sort of fall back on, but what they first try to do. So we know that they'll be interested in the tech enterprise first conversation, what that means for cost savings, workflow, the rational deletion of some of their duplicative apps, maybe new apps that are even better than the old apps, organizational leadership, in-app usage, actually stepping up into those boots as even superintendents need to do to think about this. They don't need to just be people pleasers. They now need to lead a tech enterprise. This is a very different thing. And you're going to see a lot of talk about this from Learning Council. And then more districts that are not well organized in ed tech, we're just going to be seeing a lot more of them come out of the woodwork. We're convinced of that. And they'll still be buying, and they'll be earlier on the maturity scale and awareness than many others. So let me talk about just for a second what we say to them from regards to what they've already tried or we've seen tried by their peers somewhere else in the country, and it didn't work yet. And those are these things. The model means different things to different people. Okay, so I'm not going to get into those things until on a later slide, but the model means something different to different people. I do want to say that the curriculum has been tried all over the country. Like, let's try this different curriculum, let's try that different curriculum. And that includes method of teaching. A lot of PD on you better be better at this, and don't lecture so long, and do this instead, and use your interactive whiteboard, and do this and do that. And it's just been pounding on teachers, all the ways they could be a better teacher, right? 70% at least have tried something in those arenas, either the content itself or like I said, teaching method. And those wars are going to go on probably forever. And then cultural leadership, like being nice to people. And like, I've heard superintendents, and one of my favorite ones said, I want little acts of kindness every day. I love that. And little acts of kindness do add up, right? But if you give your culture that shift, that's a really good leadership position. It's not going to keep the boat out of the storm. Not with all the change that's going on outside of education. The friction is too great, but it's a good stopgap. And then there's, implementation supports, giving people more playlists to use, pre-prepared, giving them all the technology they ever wanted, assistant teachers, tutors thrown in, those are all good. But it's still not changing the whole dynamic. And then schedule change, that's a big one, especially around Georgia. Redefining the teaching roles. If you ask a teacher to define what a teacher is, or any educator, it comes out different from everybody. And that's just not acceptable anymore, to know what we really are and what we need to be, like for the future. The overall form obviously is changing the market, but it's still in most people's mind, 100% whole group, synchronous motion across, the factory model, and one teacher to many. That's what people think is the form of education. And it's the only form they really think of, unless they go, oh yeah, online, this is just a course. You just go, nobody even talks to you. It's a chat bot. So they've got this bifurcated thinking. And then people are trying grades and age segmentation differently, and trying to also redefine student roles. What are you as a student? And then thinking about course versus class orientation, especially if they have an alt program or an online program. And then they're trying to market, they're trying to brand, because they know they have competition. So those are the things that have been tried. But let me talk about we're going to be showing this all fall, probably a new version of it. But here's the maturity model. It starts with step one. We saw this during the pandemic, device rollouts, right? Equity and access concerns, that happens first. And then app proliferation, tons of apps. That continues going for quite a while. And then new classroom teaching methods, it's still not working. So I've got to try something else. So here's a new model, and And then a lot of ed tech PD. Then there's all those new curriculum programs, STEM, if you didn't already have them, STEM, more CTE, different CTE, hands-on stuff, project-based learning, all the different things they can do with special needs, or, just anything that they'll throw at the wall to go, okay, we need social emotional, we need robotics, we need drones, we need, AR, VR, all that stuff happens, and it's kind of ongoing from there on out. And then you've got this, because the tech is in play, because of the pressure from the market, let's increase personalization. Let's just really drive home every student has all your attention as a teacher, which is impossible. So teachers get overwhelmed. This is the first stage of sheer overwhelm, even like as they're getting their first feet wet and all the tech. Then there's the noticing of the dramatic attrition and the lack of teachers and the absenteeism and the low achievement. All of that starts to build up and fester in the organization. And then they get to where we're at right now with a lot of districts. We need to refine our app inventory. We have too much stuff. We need to get a little bit more organized. So that's happening. And then there's a fallback to stressing human teaching, because they know a lot of teaching and learning is going online or homeschooling. So they're stressing their humans, and that's not wrong. But they're also trying to like backpedal into what we were doing, 250 years ago with textbooks in many cases, and campus culture. So there's a like, really like, we got to get serious here and like, be human and no one can beat us. And I don't disagree with that, but I do think that it's not thinking ahead of what we have to be as humans very specifically in a changed world. We're there right now with most of the big superintendents. You're going to see them making that sort of PR play, falling back on stressing their human culture, teaching, the how great they are and how nice they are and how beautiful the campuses are and all that stuff. Just think about that for a minute. What does that mean? Well, the very next thing they hit is an innovation ceiling. So they haven't shifted model away from whole group, synchronous, grade by grade, marching through the halls. And generative AI has arrived. This is the friction point. AI is not just a tool to go into the classroom. It can restructure the exact mechanism of how you execute teaching and learning, especially time AI. When you add time AI with recommendations engine AI, generative AI, possibly computer vision, some of the regressive AI, you're going to see the ability to articulate to the one and then add the teacher where the teacher is needed. AI can know when it needs a human. You see the flip there? There's a complete flip, right? Whereas like the humans deciding where to put things in, we're not far from the AI deciding where to put the humans in. This is going to be a big difference. So we're there. We're there at that friction, and there are going to be people out there in these districts that are like, stop selling me things. Point solutions. Talk to me about the future. Well, that's what Learning Counsel is doing. That's what we're doing on the road. We're going, hey, look at this, look at this, look at this. Now add it all up in your mind. What kind of a pile is that? And then the final thing will be a model divergence. And many will try to stick to the traditional whole group model because they don't understand the other models or what it could be. Or maybe they're just afraid, or it's too much, or they're too big, and it's too political, and it's too hard, and they have to prep all their courses now, and they can't just fly by the seat of their pants lesson to lesson. They have to get organized. They have to use AI in a concerted way rather than a point way. Versus, and they'll double down on that, by the way. They'll double, and they'll be loud about it, and it'll hit the news, and it'll be like, can't this be like it was 200 years ago? What is the matter with you people? And it'll be violent sometimes. I don't know how violent, but I mean, just loud, maybe not just physically violent, but loud. And then the other direction will be converged AI that's Uberized. That's the time AI, which will take apart the whole group model and replace it with cohorting based on pace, not necessarily competency, but it will trigger fractionalized classes, just the teaching, just the need for the human to either lecture or do Socratic discussion or go up to the interactive whiteboard or use the AR, VR or whatever lab they need, but it'll be just that point, not the reading, the watching of the video. All that can be done independently. That's what I mean by fractionalizing the time. That model shift will be the other direction. And the leaders in that will probably be the micro schools more than, or maybe some alt programs or some minor pilot in the big districts that are brave, that have good leadership. Like the leaders who will be like, oh, you're upset about this? Well, let's try it anyway. Those leaders are rare. And they'll do everything they can to make sure that they lead forward and do something for their kids no matter what. But those ones, they won't be everyone. So there'll be a bifurcation. And then after about 10 years, it'll start going the other way and we will see a wholesale shift in the market. Okay, so that's that. And I think I talked about this earlier, but that trajectory is away from distribution by teachers to distribution with teachers. It's a direct distribution. It is the difference between Amazon and Sears, like Sears being the old traditional model and Amazon being the direct to the consumer, or Uber is probably even a better example, right? Uber is like, you know, what do you need? Da, da, da. Okay, ride. And then you get off the ride, you go do your own thing, and then you need a ride, and then da, da, da. So it still will be human, but it'll use humans in a very perfected way. All right. So what that also means is that we're going to be appealing all fall and probably into the new year and writing articles and white papers and talking about this endlessly on my podcast, how to re-architect to use time AI. And get the pre-consulting you need. I don't care if it's from Learning Counsel, it should be because we kind of know everything about it. But you need to worry about your tech stack. You definitely need to have your tech stack in order. Let me see, I probably need to make this a little smaller. Make your tech stack in order so that you've got your understanding of what you're doing on your consumer front end versus the back end, and how flexible you are on schedules and all your planning, and then all your hardware and storage and your tech major systems and your what's going on in your campus and your homerooms and your directional signage and what's happening to enable you to use things outside of your sphere of domain, like tutors. What is your extra liminal, beyond your limits, extra liminal enablement? And then what are your apps? What are your discrete digital learning objects? All that kind of stuff. And then on the curriculum map side, going beyond just, I'm going to stop at the classroom door and now it's over to you as a teacher, and actually building out the courses. But more than that, building them out so that you can measure against time, right? Like time on task. The kid took this long on this step, which is, he took only 30 minutes, but the average is an hour. And then he was enrolled in the next class, and the other fast kids got in there and they all took off on this class. And then these other kids, like more than an hour. And where does the teacher's attention go? It goes to the kids who are needing it the most. And then the fast ones, they get the course done, they get kicked up to the next teacher, or they get more materials or a sideshow, sort of extra excursion of learning, whatever they need. But that's the level of where AI is going to take us. And you got to get your tech stack ready for that. You can't just have a view of the tech as all just globs over here and globs over there. It has to work as one seamless enterprise. So let's talk on what else we're going to talk about in the fall. We're going to talk about what is the definition of a teacher in an AI converged world, which we're not there yet, but what is it going to be? Let's get people ripening to understand what that means. So it means that they don't have to build the lessons anymore. It means that they're a facilitator and they will still leverage AI themselves and courseware. They're going to co-deliver feedback, especially with nuance and support, particularly emotional support. And they're going to still differentiate. They're still going to use tech in a more structured and purposeful way. They're going to be the guide on the side in terms of role and a mentor in learning behavior. And they'll spend way more time than ever before diagnosing. That means understanding the human mind more and how to get a kid coached up to learn and motivated and maybe given a different set of materials because they're still not getting it, or they need something in their interest pattern in order to get it. Those are the things that a teacher's time is better put on anyway. And that would be the new definition with the convergence of AI and content versus this old definition, which is they got to create every unit, do all the daily plans, report on it, show examples, have people come in and check on them all the time, constantly. They're the primary content deliverer. They'll still do content delivery, but it'll be like, here's the snippet you need to content deliver on, and then execute well on that, however you want to, but just execute on that. And then doing a lot of manual grading and tracking progress manually for every single kid who might be at different points. Now, every time they teach, everybody at the same point, which is great, right? Like everybody's here, and some of them will need a different thing than but it won't be a wide variant where people are at different grade levels. Okay, and then they'll still be using tech, but in this pattern that we're in right now, it's really fragmented and inconsistent, and it's enormously expensive. Hugely expensive for the average school. They have been mostly the sage on the stage, and they've been dominated, their time's been dominated by prep, grading, behavior management, and none of them want that, I'm just telling you. All right, so I won't share this completely with you, but we did some work, and we'll do an article on this pretty soon about accommodating this arrival of time AI and the whole convergence of AI. What does it mean to talk about a school structure? Because the definition just changed. What does it mean to talk about a school form? Because that definition just changed. What does it mean to talk about the model? That definition also changed. And what do we mean when we say teaching method? That definition also changes. So we're in this seminal moment. We're about to tip over into even new, wider definitions, or maybe wildly opposite definitions of what we've ever thought of before. This is really going to be important when you have discussions with people like, what model are you? Because if they're still the whole group only thinking, that's going to limit all ed tech anyway. Even though you might be selling mostly to that world, ultimately when AI comes in, it's a very limited game pattern to work only in the sequenced pattern that's been there for the last 250 years. So the model shift concerns that we share with people too, and we'll be doing this in the fall, is that the future looks like self-competition and student agency being very paramount to personalization, so that we can use the fewer teachers that we have, but really more importantly, it's a consumer demand. It might be in some places in the country that you'll see districts and schools say, oh, but my students don't have any agency. It's been like burned out of them, or maybe they culturally just don't have any agency. They don't care about education. They come from a country where it's not a formal need, or they're just not inculcated into it. I don't care what the situation is. The bulk of the consumer market is very clearly saying, in every bit of research that we look at, they want their own agency. And they want to have self-competition, which is the ultimate in personalization. Like, you can take the word personalization by teacher all the way to here, and then it's, I'm going to personalize it myself and compete with myself to learn even more than you gave me to do, which is some of the school models that are out there now that are kind of cool. It also may be a problem that cultures will not tolerate well the non-grade banding by age. If you wanted to give someone who's in 9th grade the 2nd grade materials they actually need, this could be a problem with them and their parents. That's going to mean how you distribute and what your pieces and courses look like, or if you're an ed tech company, what your courseware looks like is going to have to be differentiated itself. Because if you do have to teach a 9th grader how to read at the 2nd grade level, then it shouldn't look like babyish stuff. And vice versa, right? Like, you got really young kids that are going to be like zooming way ahead, and they're, absolutely gifted children, and you don't want to have anything with nuance that's only for older kids. There's also going to be a new intentional kind of socialization. One of the things that's coming out in every survey is that culturally, we've got friction everywhere, particularly the big inner cities. It's off the charts bad. So how are you going to create some more intentional learning socialization, not just by studying social emotional lessons, but by practical things like games or drills internally, or boot camps? What do you do to cause this? It's never been education's role to intention, and they don't, like, it's not a course, right? And until social emotional stuff came along, we have to socialize, right? We were like, we resisted that. We didn't have to do that. Now we have to do that. And people are realizing we really have to do it. Okay. So then the teacher's day is going to be dramatically different if they move to the new model. You're just like corporate America now. It's like, what's on my roster for today? I got to do this half-hour meeting, then I got an hour-long lab, and then I got 5 minutes in between, and then I got to do a 15-minute check-in with these 3 kids, and then I got to wander around. I got to check on these 6 kids, probably going to give them each 2 minutes apiece, and just go, what are you doing? What are you doing? Okay, get on this, get on that. Here's some more stuff. And then I got an hour-long lecture, and then I got a 20-minute discussion for, well, only 6 kids, so forth. Like, this is going to look random and wild to teachers, but it's actually the way that you can truly personalize. And then there's going to be a lot of pre-work. A lot of companies are going to make a lot of money off the pre-work to actually do the shift that needs to be done. And there will be a difference in testing by level instead of by age, but we looked in the laws. It's not illegal to do. It's just not anticipated. All right. So then let me introduce you to Felicia Trey. She's doing what I'm talking about right now as a new model, and it's brilliant, and it's working really, really good for them. And then in terms of our help and your thinking, if you're an educator listening to this right now, then contact us. Let us know what you're thinking with, like, what's your problems, like, what's going on over there, and then we can sort of think through, well, maybe do this. So those are my takeaways about what's going to be happening this fall, and what the mood is, and basically what we'll be seeing out there. I think it's going to be kind of the Wild West, but I want you to think about how you're going to want to participate and which cities are going to be right for you. And then, tell us what you want your market to know if you're an ed tech vendor. And if you're an educator, don't be shy. Like, you can even email us at events, go, don't forget to talk about this when you come here, or have a separate call with us to go, wow, what are you thinking? Like, what would be good for us, or where could we start? And let's just work together. And like, we're really interested in helping educators actually get to the point where their schools are relevant and meet the needs of their local population. And that's not necessarily the same for everybody. We all know that. It could be wildly different. It could be like the model I'm talking about, or maybe it is going to stay traditional. All right, so that's what I have to share with you for today. And thank you very much for listening. If I didn't say it earlier, of course, I'm LeiLani Cauthen, CEO of Learning Counsel, news media publisher, lead researcher, podcaster, person running around the country, going and leading all of these events and being very interested in the future. I'm kind of a futurist. If you haven't seen my latest book, The Human Singularity, it's available on our website under the research tabs. And we hope you download it and read the whole thing, and then write to us and tell us what you think. Okay, so thanks for being with me. And again, this is LeiLani. Hope to see you in the fall. Hope you sponsor, or hope you attend. Thanks a lot.